In June 2011, the waters of the Baltic Sea were cold, dark, and quiet. A team of Swedish treasure hunters known as Ocean X was out on the waves, scanning the seafloor between Sweden and Finland. They weren't looking for aliens or lost civilizations. Instead, they were searching for old shipwrecks, specifically sunken crates of rare champagne from the First World War. For years, this team had made a living finding forgotten history at the bottom of the ocean. But on this particular day, their sonar screen showed something that didn't fit any known shipwreck. As the boat moved slowly over the surface, a massive, circular shape appeared on the monitor nearly 300 feet below. It wasn't the jagged outline of a wooden hull or the twisted metal of a modern ship. It was a solid, disc-shaped object about 200 feet wide. To the men on the boat, it looked like a giant mushroom or, more chillingly, a crashed spacecraft. The edges were straight and defined, and it sat perfectly at the end of what looked like a 1,000-foot-long runway or skid mark carved into the seabed. The discovery immediately sent a shockwave through the team. Peter Lindbergh and Dennis Asberg, the founders of Ocean X, had seen plenty of strange things on the ocean floor, but nothing like this. In the world of deep-sea mysteries, finding a perfectly geometric shape in nature is incredibly rare. The object was too big to be a lost anchor and too symmetrical to be a simple rock. The team began to wonder if they had stumbled upon an unexplained ruin or perhaps a piece of military technology that had been kept secret for decades. News of the Baltic Sea anomaly spread quickly, fueled by the grainy sonar images that looked suspiciously like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. People around the world began to speculate. Was it a sunken UFO? Was it an ancient temple from a submerged civilization that lived in the Baltic when the area was still dry land? Or was it a secret weapon from the Cold War? While the internet buzzed with theories, the Ocean X team knew they needed more than just a sonar image to solve the mystery. They needed to go down there. Preparing for a dive at that depth is no easy task. The Baltic Sea is notoriously difficult to navigate. The water is murky, filled with sediment, and the temperature at the bottom stays just above freezing. It is a world of total darkness where the pressure is immense. To get a better look, the team would need specialized equipment, deep-sea divers, and a lot of luck. They spent months raising money and gathering the tools necessary to return to the exact coordinates where the disk was resting. When they finally returned a year later, in June 2012, they brought a remote-controlled underwater vehicle equipped with cameras and a team of professional divers. They expected to find a strange rock or perhaps a very unusual shipwreck. What they didn't expect was for their own technology to start failing the moment they got close. As the ship hovered directly over the object, the divers reported that their satellite phones stopped working. Even the cameras and the electrical equipment on the boat began to flicker and shut down. It seemed as though the object was projecting some kind of interference, making it almost impossible to document. Despite the technical glitches, the divers eventually managed to descend into the gloom. They carried powerful lights to cut through the black water, hoping to finally see the surface of the anomaly with their own eyes. As they got closer to the bottom, the massive shape loomed out of the darkness. It wasn't made of wood or the rusted steel they were used to seeing. Instead, it looked like giant slabs of dark, soot-colored stone. The divers noticed right away that the object didn't just look like a disc from a distance. It had right angles, smooth hulls, and what appeared to be stairs or ledges built into its side. One of the most unsettling things the divers noticed was that the object sat on a thick pillar, making it look like a giant stone mushroom rising about 25 feet off the seabed. There were no sharp, jagged edges that you would expect from a rock that had broken off a cliff. Instead, the surfaces were rounded and smooth in some places, while perfectly flat in others. Near the top of the structure, they found a hole that looked like an entrance, surrounded by a ring of what looked like burnt or charred rock. It was as if something incredibly hot had once rested there. As the team moved their lights across the surface, they realized that the runway they saw on the sonar was just as strange as the object itself. It looked like a long, flattened path of ground leading right up to the structure, as if the object had slid across the seafloor before coming to a complete stop. They began to collect small samples of the material to bring back to the surface, hoping that lab tests would finally tell them if this was a gift from another world or a forgotten piece of our own history. Back on the surface, The OceanX team began to analyze the small fragments they had managed to chip away from the structure. If the anomaly was just a natural rock formation, the lab results should have shown common granite or sandstone typical of the Baltic region. However, the initial reports were far from ordinary. Some of the samples were sent to scientists like Volker Bruchard, an associate professor of geology at Stockholm University. While many of the rocks were indeed types of granite and gneiss brought down by glaciers long ago, there were other pieces that didn't fit that story quite so easily. Some fragments contained high amounts of limonite and goethite. While these minerals can form naturally, some researchers pointed out that they are often associated with processed metals or ancient construction. Even more puzzling were reports of burnt rock. The divers had described the top of the object as looking like black soot or scorched earth. When these pieces were examined, researchers found they weren't just dirty. They appeared to have been subjected to extreme heat, much higher than what you would expect to find at the bottom of a freezing sea. This discovery led to a new theory that moved away from aliens and toward a more earthly, but equally mysterious explanation: secret military history. Some researchers suggested the Baltic Sea anomaly might be a forgotten relic from World War II. During the war, the Baltic was a strategic battleground between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The Germans were known for building massive anti-submarine structures. Some theorists proposed that the anomaly was a base for a secret wire mesh device designed to scramble the sonar and radar of enemy submarines. This would explain why the OceanX team's electronics failed the moment they drifted directly over the object. However, the size of the anomaly made this theory difficult for many to accept. At 200 feet wide, it would have been an incredible engineering feat to build and sink such a massive concrete or metal structure in the middle of a war. Furthermore, there are no surviving records in either German or Russian archives that mention a project of this scale in that specific location. If it was a secret weapon, it was a secret that stayed buried even after the war ended. As the team continued to study the footage they had captured, they noticed even more strange details. On top of the disc, there were formations that looked like small stone walls or corridors. These weren't random cracks caused by the pressure of the ocean. They looked like they had been designed with a purpose. One diver, Stefan Hogborn, noted that in his 20 years of diving and 6,000 dives, he had never seen anything like it. He described the surface as looking like rough concrete, yet when they tried to scrape it, it felt as hard as stone. The runway, or track leading up to the object, also remained a major point of debate. Geologists argued that it could be a natural furrow created by a moving glacier thousands of years ago. But the way the track lined up perfectly with the object seemed too coincidental for some. To the OceanX team, it looked exactly like a crash site. They imagined a heavy, circular craft hitting the seafloor with immense force, sliding through the mud and silt for hundreds of feet before finally losing its momentum and settling on the spot where it sits today. Despite these observations, the scientific community remained skeptical. Most geologists believe that the Baltic Sea was shaped by massive ice sheets during the last ice age. When the ice melted and retreated, it dropped huge piles of rocks and earth in strange shapes, known as glacial erratics. They argued that the anomaly is simply a large deposit of rock that happened to fall in a circular shape, and the walls and stairs are just natural fractures caused by the cooling of the earth or the weight of the water above. Yet, this explanation didn't satisfy everyone. If it was just a pile of rocks, why did it look so much like a single, solid structure? And why did the divers' equipment fail only when they were directly above it? The OceanX team wasn't ready to give up. They knew that to prove the anomaly was something more, they would need to look closer at the chemical makeup of the site and find out if there was anything hidden inside the structure itself. As the debate between scientists and treasure hunters grew, the focus shifted toward the strange chemical signatures found at the site. One of the most puzzling reports to come out of the OceanX investigations involved a piece of material that was sent to a laboratory for testing. According to the team, the lab found that the sample contained metallic elements that were not common in natural geological formations of the Baltic Sea. Specifically, there were traces of basalt that seemed to have been altered by something incredibly hot. Basalt is a volcanic rock, but there are no active volcanoes in that part of the Baltic Sea, and there haven't been for a very long time. This led some researchers to suggest that if the object wasn't a secret weapon or a spacecraft, it might be a remnant of an ancient, submerged civilization. Thousands of years ago, when sea levels were much lower, the area that is now the Baltic Sea was dry land. It is possible that ancient people built a temple or a monument that was eventually swallowed by the rising waters as the glaciers melted. This would explain the stairs and corridors, though it wouldn't explain why the divers' electronic equipment reacted so strangely. To find more answers, the team looked at the sonar data again. They noticed that the anomaly wasn't just a single disk. Nearby, there was a second, smaller object that also had a strange, angular shape. This suggested that the site wasn't just a random rock dropped by a glacier, but perhaps an entire complex. If two objects with similar geometric features were sitting near each other, the odds of it being a natural coincidence seemed to drop. The team began to refer to the area as a field of anomalies, wondering if an entire fleet or a whole city was waiting to be discovered beneath the silt. However, moving the investigation forward proved to be a massive challenge. Deep-sea exploration is incredibly expensive, and the OceanX team was a small group of divers, not a government-funded agency. As the years passed, the hype around the Baltic Sea anomaly began to fade in the mainstream media, making it harder for the team to find the money for more advanced expeditions. Without a massive drilling rig or a high-powered submarine capable of cutting into the object, they couldn't see what was inside the stone-like exterior. Despite the lack of new funding, the story never truly died. To this day, the Baltic Sea anomaly remains one of the most talked about UPARTs, or out-of-place artifacts, in the world. For skeptics, it is a classic case of pareidolia, which is the human tendency to see familiar shapes, like faces or spaceships, in random patterns of rock and shadow. They believe the runway is just a geological ridge and the UFO is just a strangely shaped hill. But for the divers who were actually there, the experience was much harder to dismiss. They point to the fact that their compasses would spin wildly and their cameras would black out only when they were within a few feet of the object. They talk about the perfectly smooth 90-degree angles they felt with their own hands in the freezing mud. Even if it isn't a crashed ship from another galaxy, the anomaly represents a massive gap in our knowledge of the seafloor. It reminds us that even in a part of the world as busy and well-mapped as Northern Europe, the ocean is still capable of hiding secrets that we can't easily explain. Today, the object still sits 300 feet below the surface, slowly being covered by the fine silt of the Baltic Sea. Whether it is a masterpiece of ancient engineering, a forgotten relic of a world war, or just a trick played by nature and ice, it continues to spark curiosity. It serves as a reminder that the deep sea is like a time capsule, holding on to mysteries that wait patiently for the day we finally have the technology and the courage to uncover the full truth.